Good morning and welcome back to Dr. Kim's Going Live. My name is Lara. I've been a part of the Awesome Marriage team since January, and I've been married almost 2 years coming up this August. And Dr. Kim, how are you?
I'm good this morning. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. Can you quickly introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Dr. Kim, and I am the head of Awesome Marriage and started it. And I've been married for 51 years to Nancy, and yeah, I know, it's amazing. And so, yeah, just love doing stuff about marriage and talking about this, and love getting to do this live. It's fun.
It's so fun. And I know that you guys have been married 51 years, but every time I hear 51, I'm just like, oh my goodness, that is amazing.
I know. I can remember my grandparents had their 50th anniversary. I was like, oh, they're so old. And
it's just, it's incredible. I love it.
Yeah. So yeah,
you're barely celebrating 2 years, and then you're 51. It's just
you're on the track. You're on the right track.
Well, I hope that everyone had a great Memorial Day. I know that I did. It was a little bit cloudy and overcasty, but it was still awesome just to be with family and celebrate. And yeah, it flew by. It's already June 1st. How is it June 1st?
It is amazing.
Well, today we're going to go over the Awesome Marriage just kind of schedule. And so first up is Awesome Marriage Podcast, which came out this morning. And it is worth repeating, 5 Ways to Affair-Proof Your Marriage, Part 1. And so, Dr. Kim, will you just explain this podcast, just a brief sentence about
that? There's 2 parts of it. The second one will come out next week, I guess. Next day. And it really is, it's just how do you affair-proof it? And so what are the things that you can do as a couple and individually to do that? So I'll go over the 5 real quick, and then you can listen to how we flesh it out on the podcast. But staying close to God, staying close to your spouse, ways to do that, making truth and utmost priority. In other words, if you've got trust, don't lose it. And then if you do, we've got some ideas of how to rebuild that. Don't leave room for suspicion. I don't want Nancy to ever doubt me or to worry about what I'm doing or not doing. Another one is don't give Satan a foothold. We know that the enemy is after marriages, and especially Christian marriages, and he's going to throw things at us, and we've just got to be prepared for that so we don't grab onto it. And so we're able to push it away. And the closer we stay to God, the easier that is to do.
Oh,
so
definitely.
I think it's got some really good stuff in it, real practical things that everybody can do. It's not like, oh my gosh, you have to do all this stuff. No, it's real practical stuff. It's just being intentional about it, and it makes a difference.
Yeah, and that's what I love so much about Awesome Marriage is that everything is so practical. It's not something that you have to just, spend every single day, all day doing. It's practical steps that can genuinely help your marriage.
Right.
So stay tuned. So check that out. It's on the Awesome Marriage website, or you can check it out on any podcast app. And then for the blog, the Awesome Marriage blog, we're going to talk a little bit more about this in a little bit, but it's titled, Is It Time to Let Go? And then one of your quotes is that it happened pretty suddenly since God had been pricking my conscience for so long. And then this is a 4-part series of the wrenches that we started. And today we're ending it. So we're going to skip over that and come back to it in just a little bit. And if you guys have any questions for us, please just comment below, and we'll either get to it today or we'll answer it next week.
Absolutely.
And then for the dispatch this week, it's titled Fear in Marriage. And Dr. Kim, what is this about?
Well, we're talking about just anxiety. What fears do, and how does that affect your marriage? Whether they're fears that have something to do within your marriage or something that you've kind of brought into your marriage, all those kind of things. And how do you handle that if your spouse is having anxiety, if your spouse is fearful? You don't say things like, get over it or suck it up, which when Nancy had her first anxiety episode, that's probably about what I did, because, I was 20 years old. I had no clue how to handle something like that. It's basically, we talk about how if you have a spouse or that's in that kind of situation, how to come alongside them, how to help them through this, and some good practical ideas there. Because it's something I think in our culture today, especially coming out of the year of COVID, that a lot of couples are experiencing, and a lot of couples, most of us don't know how to handle that. So this just kind of give you some guidelines of things to do to help you through this time and season of your marriage.
Yeah. And I think that's great. And I know that May was Mental Health Awareness Month, but I also think it's so important that we continue to talk about it.
Yes.
So check that out. It's going to be on the Awesome Marriage website on Thursday. Okay. So today we're going to do something a little different. We're going to take a deep dive into the blog. And like I said earlier, it's titled, Is It Time to Let Go? And okay. So Dr. Kim, can you explain this just a little bit before we start getting more in depth?
Yeah, I think what happens a lot of times, we talk about putting God first, the spouse second all the time. And I think a lot of times we have other things that take the place of this. And so this whole idea is creating margin, this whole theme of which means being more intentional in your marriage, having more time for your spouse. So is there something you need to let go of? Is it something that is causing harm to you and your marriage, or is it something that's really not a bad thing, maybe even a good thing, but it's taking away from your marriage? And so is there something in your life that you need to let go of because it's affecting your marriage? Maybe not, you may not realize that, like say if you're volunteering at church, okay, that's a good thing.
Yeah.
But if you're volunteering, 40 hours a week and you're not home in the evenings or you're doing things like that, it's going to affect your marriage, and your marriage has to come first.
I love that. And when I was reading it, I was like, oh my gosh, I can relate to this on so many levels. I can not even intentionally be doing something week after week. A good example is I love to spend time with my mom. My mom and I are really close and we spend a lot of time together, but I can honestly, like after a couple of weeks of us spending a lot of time together, I can feel Ben and I's relationship, we're not fighting, we're not mad at each other, but we're just not as close as we typically are. And so when that happens, I need to pull myself back and say, okay, I need to spend more time with Ben this week. I need to be more, attentive to him and pay more attention to him. And so I think that this is just like so relatable for so many people.
Yeah. I think that's a great example, because I think sometimes, like with your mom, or I think other ladies I know who have a really good friend that they spend a lot of time with, enjoy being with, and maybe sometimes it is a little harder to be with your husband, but you're not going to make it better if you don't spend that time with him.
Definitely.
Sure, you're doing that.
Yeah. And one of the quotes that I pulled from the blog, you said, I think it is so important for each of us to be honest about our vulnerabilities. We all have them. And we all do have them. And I want to talk about that. So you said earlier, we all have good and bad things. So let's kind of define that. So you said a good thing can be, being at church, volunteering, hobbies, spending time with your friends or family. And then bad things obviously would be, an addiction, spending too much money, shopping a little bit too much.
Porn, I'm going to slip porn, things like that in there.
Yeah. And so do you think that God gave us these things for us to work on through our lives? Or do you think that these things just kind of developed over time, just like with society and culture?
Well, I think, the fact that we live in a world that's fallen, it's not perfect like it was in the very beginning. And so I think what I see in my life is that those things are there in my life, and I have to deal with them. God wants me to know that he's always there to help me to walk through that, to have answers where I don't have them anywhere else,
Yeah.
I think they're there. I don't know whether God puts them in front of us or not, but I also, whatever way they happen, I know he's there to help us get out of it, to get through it.
So let's say that somebody does have a vulnerability and they're fully aware of it, but they don't want to stop doing it. What would you say to them?
Well, I think you could, that's hard, because you got to be honest with yourself. You've got to, and I think sometimes we have some of the things we've talked about that you don't want to give up. Maybe you are volunteering somewhere and you just got Volunteer of the Year award there, and everybody thinks you're wonderful, and you may not get those same praises at home, and yet home is where you need to be more. I mean, you've got to have the balance in that. So I think it's for some of those things that sometimes we're reluctant to let go of, and they may be good things. I think pastors deal with this a lot. That it's easy to say, well, I've got somebody at my church that needs help, and so I'm going there, and so you're leaving your family home a lot. I heard a story that I loved. It was about a guy that was a youth leader. And so he was walking out the door, and his wife and kids are on the porch, and he goes, I'm going to go lead the huddle group. And she goes, what about this huddle group? And I think sometimes we forget how much we're needed there. And if we're working for God or doing something good, sometimes it's easy to act like, well, this is important, and not realize what it can do to our family. The bad things, it's pretty easy. Most of us really know when we're in a situation like that. If I'm having addiction, or I'm, spending all the time on video games or whatever it is, most of us know that, okay, this is taking away from something that's more valuable. And then those, I think we make that choice maybe in a different way than we make the choice of volunteering or things, because we know we're taking away.
So what if we're not fully aware of like a vulnerability that we have? How do we figure out if we have one, or if it's affecting our marriage in a negative way?
I think you ask the expert, your wife or husband. Okay. I mean, you say, hey, I know I've been thinking about, this I'm doing this. And I'm talking about things that really, here are probably the things we consider good things.
Yeah.
How's that affecting you? Am I being gone too much? I can cut back on, whatever, get in a conversation with your spouse. Now, you've got to set it up so your spouse will be honest with you too.
Yes.
And to your spouse to know he or she can be honest and not have any repercussions, that this is something you're really trying to work through. If it's one of the bad things, I think the answer is you go to your spouse and say, it's probably no news to you that I'm addicted to this or that, and I'm ready to change. I'm ready to get help. And I just need your prayers, and I need you to walk through me with this.
Yeah, that's so good. And then what if it's opposite? So what if it's the spouse that has a vulnerability, and so what if, for example, what if Boone has this vulnerability that I notice, but he doesn't notice it? Do I approach him with this, or do I let him figure this out on his own?
I think as a spouse, I think it's one of the things we do. And I think it's coming and say, hey, can we set it? First, I'd pray, definitely pray. Like, God, give me the right words to say. And then to say to Boone, hey, can we find a time to sit down and talk this afternoon? And you do that, make sure there's no distractions, things we talk about all the time that you do when it's something important. And then I think just pray from your heart. I know you may not even be aware of this, but I want to tell you something that's affecting me and how it's affecting me, and hopefully we can work on it together. And just kind of set the stage. If you're doing this as a team, you're not criticizing him. You're just telling him that, hey, you're spending all the time with your buddies. You're going out with them 4 nights a week, and I'm just sitting here by myself. That's not what I want our marriage to be. I want you to have time with your friends, but I want your first time to be with me. And if we need to do some things that make it more enjoyable for us to be together, I'm willing to try something new with you.
What do you think one of those things can be? Like more date nights, more dinners? What are you thinking?
Yeah, and I think each couple be a little different, but I think date nights are so important. I think, and a lot of times couples will have date nights and you go with friends, and that's great. But I think you need to have the date night, just the two of you. And part of that comes from the way Nancy and I started dating. We ate together almost every night, whether it's at school or somewhere out when we were in college. And so I think our relationship grew so much by sitting across from a table from each other and just having that time to talk and interact. And so I think date nights, if you're going to see a movie, if you're back in the movies now, that have dinner or do something before or after, or walk around where you can talk. And so look for those opportunities. So date nights are good. Just having that time every day where you just sit down and say, hey, how was your day? What's going on in your life? Is there something I can be praying for you about? Just things like that. So you stay in touch with each other, because with the busyness of life, and especially if you've got 2 or 3 kids running around, you can go a week and not hardly say anything but hello, goodbye to your spouse. So you've got to be intentional about putting some of those times in.
Oh, absolutely. Well, this blog comes out tomorrow. That's unfortunately all the time that we have today, but this blog comes out tomorrow, and it is so good. You guys should check it out. You can find it on the Awesome Marriage website, and just go to the blog and then click it, and it will be the first article. And then next week we have a special guest, Lindsay Few, and she is the content editor and podcast producer. So join in next Tuesday. She'll be here. And then if you have any questions for Dr. Kim, just drop in the comment section below, and we will answer it next week. And I hope that you guys all have a great week. And thank you so much for tuning in.
Thanks for joining us. See you next week.